Hi, I'm David Mania, the Minister of Finance and Economic Opportunities in the Western Cape, and I'd like to welcome you all to this Cape Health Tech webinar. The health technology sector is an important sector for us in the Western Cape because it currently contributes an estimated 1.7 billion rand to the provincial economy and creates approximately 2,500 full-time jobs in the Western Cape. Around 40% of the top 10 Western Cape export markets for medical technology are in Africa, while Europe, the United States, and the United Kingdom are the top export markets for pharmaceuticals. And so it's no wonder that the Western Cape boasts a number of highly innovative digi-health companies. We have the overwhelming evidence that Cape Town is Africa's leading tech capital. Now we need to jointly tell the world. And it's for this reason that just last week we launched a unified tech brand for Cape Town and the Western Cape, officially positioning Cape Town and the Western Cape as Africa's tech capital. The initiative seeks to clearly represent the values, skills, talent, innovation, and lifestyle offered by the tech ecosystem of Cape Town and the Western Cape, and of course to showcase Cape Town as Africa's tech capital. This will attract international investment and funding, reinforce our brand to stimulate exports of our tech products and services, stimulate uptake of tech in our local industries, and of course raise awareness of the tech career opportunities for young people in the Western Cape. We invite the medical tech sector to join this collective and get the logo. For more information, visit westgrow.co.za. I thank you.
This past year has forced every business, sector, and individual to reimagine how they operate. So we're excited to welcome you to the first virtual version of Cape Health Tech Week. South Africa's pharma and medical device sectors are the largest and most advanced in sub-Saharan Africa, with pharmaceutical and medical device sales more than doubling in the last 10 years to reach 48 billion rand and 19 billion rand in 2019, respectively. The pharmaceuticals market in Africa is expected to grow to $45 billion in 2020 and more than 160 billion by 2024. This would represent a compound annual growth rate of more than 20%. In 2016, the Western Cape had 43 health technology firms, with 72% focused on medical technology and the remaining balance focused on pharma biologicals. It's no wonder that here, in the tip of Africa, the future of medical innovation is not only being imagined, it's also being created. And now COVID-19 has catapulted the tech sector, particularly the medical tech sector, to innovate more rapidly than ever before. With Cape Town already celebrated as Africa's tech capital, enabled by a dynamic ecosystem, we believe there's a real opportunity for innovation and future growth.
Okay, our attendee numbers are steady, so this is the official welcome. This is for the COVID-19 health products registration and requirements session with SAHPRA. I'd like to introduce Dr. Andrea Cater. She is the Senior Manager of Medical Devices and Radiation Control at the South African Health Products Regulation Authority. She's a pharmacist and has over 10 years of experience within the field of regulatory affairs, quality assurance, quality risk management, pharmaceutical production, complementary medicines manufacture, and risk-based inspection planning. In her current role, Andrea is responsible for the application of the medical device regulatory framework in South Africa and for the regulation of medical devices and in vitro diagnostics in South Africa. She is the chair of the African Medical Device Forum and an assessor and trainer for the World Health Organization Global Benchmarking Tool. Andrea will be talking to us today about some of the changes that we are experiencing in the registration and requirements around the health sector, in particularly focusing on COVID. We know that this is a challenging time for us in the health space, and with all the wonderful innovations that are taking place, SAHPRA will help us and guide us through what the registration and requirements looks like. And what we've seen so far is Nandi Swanepoel, who's the ecosystem manager at Westgrow for Health. She has fielded quite a few questions and sent them over to Andrea so that she could also prepare her presentation accordingly to deal most appropriately with some of the burning questions that industry have indicated thus far. So while Andrea is setting up, we have prepared a poll for everybody just to participate in. I'm going to give the poll about 3 or 4 minutes just to allow everybody to quickly answer that. And then shortly afterwards, Andrea will begin with her presentation. The poll is up, so you should have it on your side shortly. We have 67% voted. Anybody else would like to cast their vote? We have another 40 seconds or so. Okay, wonderful. Thank you for your participation. We've had about a 75% participation. That's fantastic. And we will share the results with you guys. I'll share you with you quickly. And this should give us an indication of where we're all at. And I think that this, based on the responses, we're still making sense of the requirements. So I think that this webinar is very opportune, and yeah, I think I'm not going to take any more time, and I'll let Dr. Cater get to it. Thank you very much. Dr. Cater, over to you.
Great, thanks so much. Hi everybody, and thanks so much for joining us today. So hopefully I think it was 58% still making sense of requirements. So hopefully I can help you a bit with that. So yes, let's just dive straight in. I'm just going to hide that and just confirm you can see my screen then. Great. So just for anybody who is new to the industry and for the first time involved with regulated products, and these are the medical devices and IVDs. And also for some people who don't know, an IVD is an in vitro diagnostic. So that's something that's used to do a diagnosis. So something like a pregnancy test, and more specifically for COVID, we've got test kits that are able to detect whether or not you've got COVID, and also other test kits that can detect whether or not you've got antibodies to COVID. So those are just some examples. But basically, the regulation of devices stems from a piece of legislation. So that is why we say this is a regulated industry. It's because there is a regulatory mandate to control these types of products. And the piece of legislation is then the Medicines and Related Substances Act. And what we see here is from June 2017, SAHPRA became the new regulator. We used to be called the Medicines Control Council. And with the changeover in 2017, we then included this regulation of medical devices. So that's why some of you might have been in the industry for some time, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, there were all these regulatory requirements, and that is because this Medicines and Related Substances Act changed to include medical devices. Then what's also important to note is that there is the general regulations, which talks only to medicines, but in particular and of interest to you would be the regulations for medical devices. And these were published since 2016. So in actual fact, these regulatory requirements have been in place for quite some time, and they are enforceable. So if you do not comply, it means you are acting in contravention of the Act. So who and what is SAHPRA? SAHPRA is the National Regulatory Authority, and we have got a number of functions. So we regulate medicines and medical devices. We do monitoring, so that is in the case of post-market surveillance and vigilance activities, which talks to once a product is actually on the market, we do monitor that these products are still able to perform the way they're supposed to, maintaining their quality and remain safe to use. We do evaluate medicines and medical devices. So, for example, with medicines, we have already obviously registered medicines, and we would evaluate those medicines prior to allowing them on the market. Inspection activities are happening from a medical device perspective. We will see more inspection activities happening as we move to the requirements for ISO 13485 to be, enforced. And we do investigations, and we do registrations. So the regulatory model for regulating devices, we follow the WHO model, that's the World Health Organization, and we also look to what is published from the International Medical Device Regulators Forum. So it is a staged approach, and at this stage, we are doing licensing of medical device establishments. The next phase will be the registration of medical devices. So as we stand today, there is no medical device or IVD that's registered, but we do have license holders. So these are SAHPRA license holders who either manufacture or import or wholesale medical devices, and they've provided us listings of their what type of products they would be marketing and making available in the country. So that is part of the licensing procedure, is getting that listing to SAHPRA so we can understand what products are out there. The regulations for medical devices include quite a number of things. So you can just see from this very basic list, we do have some information here and requirements for the classification of devices, also instructions with regard to labeling of devices, instructions for use, application for registration, applications for licensing. So really these are some of the core things that we are dealing with at the moment. Also very important is conducting clinical trials, adverse event reporting, and the rules that talk to advertising of medical devices. And then also where we do see contraventions to the Act, this would then talk to the offences and penalties. And penalties can certainly apply if you are found to be operating in contravention of the Act. So just basically, when we look at the classifications of devices, we've got 4 classes: Class A, B, C, and D. Class D is our high risk, Class A is our low risk, and then we've got the in-betweeners. So this classification is based on the risk to the patient. So it will depend upon how long we use a product and how invasive a product is would talk to the risk of the product. So something like a hip implant that is very invasive and you have it implanted for a very long time, often, over 10 years or so, compared to something like a plaster. A plaster is also a medical device, but not invasive and generally not used for that long. So it's really important to understand these classifications because the rules change depending on the risk. So there's a lot to take in one go, and there's a large amount of information available on the SAHPRA website. But I think what's more specific to our talk today, I will also take you through just some of the communication that's been published recently to help you through the process so you can understand the requirements, also the process flows and timelines. I think there's been quite a lot of questions with regard to the exemption of Class A medical devices and what does it mean? So to start off with, an exemption means you would be exempt from a piece of the legislation or exempt from a requirement in terms of the regulatory framework. And in particular, you will note we've got a position paper that exempts license holders or anybody who's manufacturing, importing or wholesaling a Class A medical device, you are exempt from having to apply for a license. So you will see that if you've only got Class A medical devices, it means you do not need to apply for a license. But I think what's really critical is to make sure whatever medical devices or IVDs you might have, make sure it is indeed a Class A, because some stakeholders thought that they had a Class A and thought they were exempt, only to find out they actually had a Class B device and they had to have a license. So you don't want to be in that position. It's also important to note when you read this position paper, and it is available on our website, that if you've got a Class A medical device that has a measuring function or is required to be sterile, then you do need to get a SAHPRA license. You cannot manufacture, import or wholesale any medical device without a license if it's a Class A medical device that's sterile or with a measuring function, or a B, C, or D class. So please make sure that you don't get, kind of caught having or not understanding the differences here. We will have some opportunity towards the end of the session if there are further questions for clarity in this regard. But let's move on and take it from there. Then I think also what's important to note, we've got this joint communication that's a collaboration between SAHPRA, the SABS, which is our Bureau of Standards, and then also the NRCS, which is the National Regulator for Compulsory Specifications. So this document, again, is available on our website, and it gives a lot of information with regard to PPE that might be used during COVID-19. And I think this will be helpful because it outlines exactly what the requirements are for each of the products. But I'm going to just touch on it a little bit. I think there have been quite a number of stakeholders who wanted to supply masks, either import or manufacture masks, and then trying to make sense of, well, what are the different masks? Are they Class A? Am I exempt? What are the standards? What am I expected to do? So I thought we could just take some time to run through it quickly. But basically what we see here, we've got some examples of different masks. And then we talk to the classification, as in, is it a Class A medical device? Is it a Class B medical device? Is it exempt, yes or no? And then what are the specifications? So I think we've all seen cloth masks, and there have been some really exciting ones that have been available, and people have been very creative with these. And these masks are really just what we might consider an extension of respiratory etiquette. So as we know, we all have to wear masks when we are around other people. And these masks are non-medical and they are general masks. So you do not need to have a SAHPRA license to manufacture these or import these or sell these. So it's not necessary because these are not a medical device. And there aren't really specifications, but the Department of Health has issued a really great guideline on the use of cloth masks for the general public. So I invite you to have a look at that. It is available on their website. Then we get into a few kind of trickier things. So we've got what we might call a non-sterile. So this is already the first point. It's non-sterile medical or surgical mask, 1-ply, 2-ply, 3-ply mask, non-medical general. It means that the intended purpose of this particular mask is not to be used in a medical setting. So for example, if you wanted to wear this mask when you were out in public, that is again similar to the cloth mask. It's not intended to be used in a healthcare environment. It's just an extension of respiratory etiquette and so on. So it's about the intended use. Non-medical, general, you don't need a SAHPRA license for that, and there are no specifications here. Then when we jump over to the 3-ply mask, it's also non-sterile medical. This is a Class A device. Because it's non-sterile, you are exempt. You don't need to get a license because it's not intended to be sterile. So there's no NRC sales permit or authorization required, But there are specifications and standards that must be met. There's the SANS standard, and then also in terms of the Legal Metrology Act, there are requirements in terms of packaging and labeling. So if you are manufacturing or importing these, and if they're not intended for this medical use, you still need to comply with these standards, okay? Then the next point is if you've got the very same mask, but it's sterile. Remember what I explained to you about the position paper. When you have a class A that is sterile, you do need to have a SAHPRA license. And when you apply to us for the license, we will confirm that you've met this requirement in terms of the standards and specifications. So upon submission to SAHPRA, you'd have to provide evidence that you have met this specification. A dust mask is something that's used more kind of in a construction environment or for painting. So again, it's a non-medical use. Non-medical, general, you don't need to have a SAHPRA license for that. There are no NRC or SABS requirements for this particular type of mask. When we come to the respirator mask, and I think here things like N95 mask, KN95, is it FFP2, FPP2, those are what we call respirators. So they've got a much higher level of filtration, and also the fit of these masks. They've got a very tight seal over the nose and mouth. So that is a marked difference compared to these type of 3-ply masks. And again, these masks are a class B medical device. So it's a higher risk classification. You have to have a SAHPRA license if you want to manufacture or import these. And these products have to meet the SANS standard, but also the VC 8072 standard. So it is critical that you have got the evidence to support that your product is meeting this standard. You have to apply to SAHPRA for a license. You have to provide evidence of the standards. Then again, when we talk to respirator masks where they are, filtering particles, maybe a half mask, and again, they could have these names, but where they are non-medical, so the intended purpose is non-medical, then you don't need to have a SAHPRA license. You do need to have NRCS sales permit authorization, and you do need to meet these standards. The difference is also, and please guys, because there are definitely opportunists out there, if you are procuring this type of respirator mask and you intend on selling it for use in a medical environment, you most certainly need to have a SAHPRA license. Absolutely, there's no two ways about it, because I think there are quite a few chances out there who are saying, oh, but I mean, if it's this one, this dust, sorry, not dust, but could be used in the mining industry, so I don't need a SAHPRA license. I think from the COVID perspective, we've got a lot of stakeholders that are trying to supply these masks. It is critical that you have your SAHPRA license and you meet these standards. Then just in terms of gloves, so gloves, it's basically the same story. We have to say, what is the intended use of these gloves? If you think about it, and some of the ladies would know, if you've had to color your hair at home, you would have gotten some gloves in the box. So those are not medical devices. When gloves are used to protect the wearer and so on, or protect the patient, that's when they're considered to be medical devices. So again, that document that I showed you that is available on our website does explain what the difference is between different types of gloves. So for example, examination non-sterile gloves are class A. So a class A non-sterile, it means you don't need to have a SAHPRA license. But surgical sterile gloves are class B, so you do need to get a SAHPRA license. Then you also need to meet these standards. So there are 2 SANS standards that do need to be met. And when you apply to us and you list the gloves, we will need to know what the class is, and you need to provide evidence that you are able to meet these standards. Okay, and again, general gloves that are used to protect the wearer, so for example, in a laboratory or for protective purposes, must comply to these SANS standards. Okay, next up, and you'll see the presentation, we are jumping around a bit, and it's largely based on the questions that came through and areas where you asked for clarification. So we just wanted to talk to process flow for test kits, because we also see a large number of applications coming through for test kits, and there are various test kits. There are those that are the molecular test kits. Those are laboratory-based test kits that can be used to actually detect COVID virus. So these are not the rapid test kits. These are for lab-based, and they are for diagnosis of COVID. And then we've also got the serology test kits, which are testing for antibodies. So you can't use that as a diagnosis. You can only use that to find out, do you have antibodies, yes or no? And in most cases, we see that the applications coming in are for the point of care test kits. So that is something like the cassette, where you prick your finger and you put a drop of blood on the cassette, and then you're able to see whether or not you've got antibodies. So we've also got, if I can call it, a full-step process for imported test kits and for locally manufactured test kits. So if you are an importer of any of these test kits, whether it's molecular or whether it's serology, so that means whether for diagnosis or for testing antibodies, step 1 or step A is submitting your SAHPRA license application. We will evaluate that, and then if we will ask you for your technical dossier. I will go through those requirements in a second, but we would then be able to say, okay, this test kit looks promising in terms of performance, and we recommend that this test kit goes for performance evaluation by our National Reference Laboratory. The lab will then perform that evaluation, so it's a performance evaluation, and if the results meet the performance criteria, then you will be issued a SAHPRA license, and you would be issued a Section 21 authorization for, this is for, particularly for the serology test kits. And then the test kit would be authorized for use and made available on the market. So that's just really a very simplistic process flow of what would happen if you are importing a test kit. If you are manufacturing a test kit locally, what you need to do is you need to get in touch with our National Reference Laboratory, so that's the NHLS, and you would do this primary validation. So in other words, we need you, when you apply to SAHPRA, so step B is obviously applying to SAHPRA. If your test kit has gone through the validation by the National Reference Lab and can meet the performance criteria, then you apply to SAHPRA. You do need to provide us with the results of that performance evaluation, because that obviously supports the motivation for the listing of the product. We would then evaluate the license application, and should everything meet the evaluation criteria, performance specifications, you would be issued a SAHPRA license and a Section 21 authorization in the case of serology tests, and the test kit would be authorized for use. So those are just the basic steps, and I think when we do get to the Q&A session, there'd probably be more specific questions in this regard. Next up, this is also just in terms of what are you supposed to submit when you submit to SAHPRA. So in black, that is your general requirements when you submit any application to SAHPRA, and the blue is talking to test kits. So let's just run through number 1 to 7. So anytime you are submitting a license application to SAHPRA for any medical device or IVD, you need to provide a cover letter on your company letterhead that indicates your intention to apply for a new SAHPRA license, and you complete the license application form, which is in an Excel format. The application forms are available on our website, and license application 6.21 is for manufacturers, 6.22 is for distributors, and 6.26 is for wholesalers. You complete your license application form, and because it's an Excel spreadsheet, we also need you to convert that spreadsheet into PDF and initial every page. And so when you submit to us, we will get your Excel spreadsheet, plus we would get this signed PDF format of your application. You have to submit your proof of payment, and you have to submit the CV of the authorized representative. You also need to submit a quality manual or site master file, and we do have a guideline on our website on how to create or develop a quality manual site master file in case you haven't done it before. Then if you are submitting an application for the listing of any test kit, you also need to provide us with a technical dossier of that particular product. In the case of a local manufacturer, you'd also provide us then with your primary validation study. For both, you need instructions for use provided as well as copy of labeling and packaging. So this is what we consider to be a complete application. We will not process the license application further until we get all of these requested documents. So, we are really striving to have very quick turnaround times. We initially did commit to 7 to 10 days. We're not able to achieve that. We are basically able to achieve a 15-day turnaround time. That's about, a good average. And in comparison, prior to COVID, we had a 6 to 8 week turnaround time. So really the team is very committed to being as quick as possible and processing applications as quick as possible. But we really rely on applicants to provide completed application forms. It's quite difficult when we don't get completed forms and we have a lot of engagement back and forth with applicants trying to help them to get a completed application form submitted. Okay, so we've got a whole bunch of documents that have been published on our website recently, and I have shared them with Wes Grosser. I think these would probably be available on their website, but they're certainly available on our website already, on the SAHPRA website, so you can go and have a look through these documents. So I'm going to just run through them. There are 20 documents that have been published recently, and I just want to give you the high-level points, what they're all about. So document number 1 defines the regulatory requirements for medical devices for COVID. So that's any medical device for COVID, what you need to submit, what the process flow is, what the timelines are. So that provides a lot of insight into the process and timelines there. MD002 talks to the requirements for serology test kits in particular. So again, it lists which documents you're supposed to submit, what are the timelines, and trying to also just take you through the process so you can understand what the different steps are. MD03 is just a general information about testing for COVID. So it tries to provide just updated information in terms of molecular tests, serology tests, where they can be used. MD04, and this one is really critical, and you can see it dates back to March already. You will remember, if you've been involved in the industry for some time, we had allowed license holders or applicants to use the SAHPRA acknowledgement letter in lieu of a license. So that has changed. From now on, you may not manufacture, import, or wholesale any medical device or IVD without a license. So in other words, if you at this stage only have an acknowledgement letter and your shipment comes into Port Health, we will not release that shipment. You do have to have a SAHPRA license to be able to engage legally in these activities. Then MD05 just talks to expedited regulatory pathways for devices. And I mean, globally, the likes of US FDA, we also see TGA in Australia, Health Canada. Globally, all regulators are trying to have faster turnaround times and kind of modified regulatory pathways to try to get COVID-related medical devices and IVDs onto the market as quickly as possible. That being said, there's still a lot of responsibility for the regulator to make sure that any products coming in are performing appropriately, of good quality, and are safe to use. Then for MD06, that talks to laboratory testing and use of COVID-19 serology test kits. Again, this is really just an information document for stakeholders or industry members, just giving a little bit more information about how testing for COVID might unfold. MD07, and that's very important for anybody who wants to apply to list a serology test kit, that then outlines the specifications. So that would say your performance criteria for serology test kits. MD08 provides a list of ISO standards for devices and protective clothing. So actually the ISO group has been fantastic during COVID. They've made all of these standards available for free, and you can actually download them from the ISO website. Then MD09 talks to alternative regulatory licensing requirements for alcohol-based sanitizers. So just to know, sanitizers, depending on where they're used, are either controlled by the Department of Health or by SAHPRA as a medical device or a medicine. So in actual fact, what the regulatory pathway is for a sanitizer that's used on your hands, it's actually considered a medicine in the traditional regulatory pathway. But MD09, you will see that we have made provision that for alcohol-based sanitizers or hand rubs that are able to show evidence according to the WHO formulation for an alcohol-based hand rub, that they would be exempt from some of the requirements. So if you are involved in that space, please have a look at this guideline. It has been put in place to try and facilitate and make sure that there are enough good quality sanitizers available on the market. MD10 speaks to the regulatory requirements for invasive and non-invasive ventilators during COVID. MD11 talks about license conditions for serology test kits. MD12 is a notice of contravention of the Act. So we do also recognize that at the beginning of the COVID pandemic, there were so many stakeholders, individuals, companies that were just putting all sorts of things on the market, and maybe not knowingly that these are regulated products. But I can also tell you that the Act explicitly says that just because you didn't know that there was an Act and these are regulated products, it doesn't mean that you are exempt. So in other words, if you were found to be manufacturing, importing or wholesaling any medical device without the relevant authorization from SAHPRA, you would be considered to have contravened the Act, and you are liable to penalties. And penalties range from financial penalties. It could also be, having your company name on the SAHPRA website as a stakeholder that's not to be engaged with, or in the worst case, even imprisonment. The Act actually does allow for that. So please be aware of these regulatory requirements, and please ensure that you are actually in compliance. It's really critical that you are always in compliance with the Act. Then MD13 provides the process flow for locally manufactured test kits, and that would include serology and molecular test kits. And in fact, those two process flows that I showed you do come from these guidelines, and there's a lot more information there if you do want the detail. And then MD014 is the regulatory requirements for molecular test kits. MD15 is process flow for imported test kits. MD16 is the conditions for use for serology test kits. MD17 is a technical review application form that has to be submitted if you apply to list a molecular test kit. And then MD18 is specs for molecular test kits. MD9 is processing of license applications. And MD20 is certificate of free sale. So just, in closing, we recognize that there are license holders who have submitted to us, haven't heard anything yet, and have got pending applications and are hoping to find out what's going on. So we've got a really large volume that has come in, and also our entire team contracted COVID, including me. So we have been off, for 2 weeks on a rolling period. So basically the last 2 to 3 weeks, our office has basically been at a standstill. But we are up and running at the moment, and we also have got additional capacity. So I wanted to share with you, we are going to trial something. I don't know if it will work or not, but we're going to try it out. And what we'd like to do is actually publish a dashboard on our website. So if you've already applied to us, we will be emailing you with a very unique number, and you can then go on a daily basis to view on that dashboard where your number is. So it could be in an administrative screening, technical screening with committee, or license processing as in the administrative processing, or awaiting proof of payment, so that you don't have to wait for an email or phone call from us to get a status update. You could actually just look at that dashboard. Please, we are only accepting applications through this email address, which is mdcovid@sahpra.org.za. We will not process any applications that come through any other means. And this, although it's for COVID, all applications, even if your product's not related to COVID, please submit all applications to mdcovid. Please, if you've got any queries, email them directly to this email address, mdcovid. But I also hope that the dashboard would help you a lot, that you don't need to be emailing this email address the whole time trying to find out where your application is. And then also just in terms of escalation, so if you can just give us this week, we're getting our dashboard up and running, and hopefully it works well. But if you haven't had any sort of feedback or outcomes, please do email Momina Omaji, who's our Acting Deputy Director for Medical Devices, or you can email me, and we will try to sort out and provide that status update. Great, thanks so much. So I think we can dive into the questions.
Thank you, Andrea. And apologies to everybody for not notifying you about the Q&A function. Yeah, so for those of you who may have submitted your questions via the chat, I will be going through the Q&A from top to bottom. So there is time for you still to submit your questions under Q&A. If you look at the bottom of your screen, you have mute, stop video, participants, and Q&A. So please submit your questions over there. And just to let everybody know that should there be questions that we are not able to respond to immediately, or we run out of time for any reason, you're welcome to forward your questions on to webinars@westgrow.co.za, and then we'll make sure that all of those do reach Mandy as well as Andrea. So starting right at the top with the first question from Munya. For a Class 1A device with a potential measuring function, what is the timeline for application for a license and thereafter registration?
Okay, so just for clarity, there is no registration. So we've not called up any medical devices for registration. It would only be licensing of the establishment. And it means once you are licensed, you can then make those products available on the market. And provided we've received a complete application form, the timeline then is basically 10 to 15 working days.
Okay, our next question is from Lisa. For non-COVID related medical device license amendments, how do we go about obtaining feedback? I think we can just answer this briefly because we can maybe do a written feedback to our stakeholders at a later stage.
Yeah, so if you've got a pending license, as I explained, we're going to trial this dashboard. So all the applications that are sitting with us, we're basically going to issue a unique number. Then we'll email you with that unique number, and you can track on the dashboard. And that would be for COVID products as well as, you know, normal or business as usual products. So if you've submitted amendments, you've heard nothing yet, the next thing you should be hearing from us is, this is your unique number, please check out the dashboard. That's the plan. I hope it really works, and I hope it's something useful, and we really encourage any feedback. So if you think the dashboard's great, then let us know. And if you think this thing's terrible, please also let us know.
Our next question is from Lisa. For the upcoming ISO 13485 requirements, will local accreditation facilities be made available?
Yeah, so any SANUS accredited conformity assessment body that's certified or accredited to certify companies against ISO 13485, that would be acceptable. I know that there's one company so far, but you know, it's up to SANUS actually to have that whole model. We're working with them to try and boost it, because we're hoping to see more conformity assessment bodies being accredited by SANUS to do that function. So hopefully, yes, that the local market would get a bit bigger in that regard.
Thanks. We're hoping for the same thing. So for Kelowna, she's asked, how are 3M N95 masks not registered with SAHPRA being monitored? Can you please let us know about that?
Yes, I think the message also is, if any individual or any company becomes aware of any product that's being made available by someone who's not a SAHPRA license holder, please report to us. We've got a regulatory compliance unit who investigates all those reports, and we obviously can't have eyes everywhere, so we rely on those reports coming in so that we can take the necessary action. Because it's also, I mean, it is unfair that one individual must get a license and show all the certifications, and another one, and I call those people the cowboys, just do whatever they want. So if we work together and get those reports in, we do investigate, and we need to stop that, because we've had also quite a few issues of very poor quality masks going out there, claiming to be N95 or KN95 and, you know, high filtration, and then the quality is exceptionally poor. Performance is not even, you know, performance is very bad, and of course puts people at risk because they think they're protected and we've got a poor performing mask. So please report to us. We are geared up to investigate those and recall whatever we need to that's not performing well.
Absolutely, we need to protect our industry and our citizens. So the next question is from an anonymous attendee. At what point will the National Department of Health be sending out the testing strategy and the clinical guidelines?
So we unfortunately don't have, you know, we're not the custodians of those documents. So we unfortunately don't know. Every time they've been telling us it's imminent, usually they publish on a Thursday. So every Thursday we're holding our breath because they had promised us it's coming out, and here we sit. It's been about 4 weeks since they first told us it was going to be published. So we're also still waiting, unfortunately.
Okay, and I guess this is a follow-up question in a way. Once a post-market surveillance plan has been submitted, how long will SAHPRA take to approve it?
So usually we've only got a very small handful of license holders that are required at this stage to submit their post-market surveillance plan. So we will have a look, because also you would find a lot has happened during this COVID pandemic from the regulatory point of view, and much of it is we learn as we go along, and we also get continuous feedback from other regulators and also from the World Health Organization. So we've already asked certain license holders to submit their post-market surveillance plans, but we've recently just got some new requirements of what as a regulator would expect to see in there. So we'd have to share that with those particular people involved, so that they can just do updates and so on. So it's a very, iterative process. We're learning as we go, but I think really South Africa, from the regulatory point of view, we've put in as much effort as we can, but also the industry has been amazing and really accommodating and responsive in terms of these regulations and requirements that are always changing and updating. And so we're really thankful for that participation and collaboration.
The next question is from Munya, but I believe we may have already addressed this, but you can clarify, Andrea. Where from SAHPRA do we get clarity on the licensing for a non-sterile Class A medical device with the measuring function, such as a dose counter?
Okay, so it's non-sterile, it's a Class A, and it's got a measuring function. So it means you do need to apply for a SAHPRA license. And at this stage, and also this is also a message, we have moved offices. We are only accepting applications and any correspondence via that MD COVID email address. We are not accepting any hard copies. So please, also we moved. So if you did send a hard copy to our previous location at the CSIR, we are not there anymore, and we cannot accept the hard copies also because of the COVID pandemic and handling papers and documents and so on. So everything has gone electronic, and it's the usual license application process. You fill in those documents, the checklist I've given you in the slides, and submit to us via email. We will process. Again, we're endeavoring to process within 10 to 15 days. So yeah, that's basically how it would work. And also, hopefully, if you haven't submitted yet, it means that your application coming in would get that unique number. So you could check out on the dashboard what the status is of your application.
Okay, so there've been a couple of questions around samples and things like that. So the first question is from Vanessa. Do we need a license to bring a sample for initial testing before potential approval?
Yeah, so it's actually illegal to even import one sample of a device. It is in contravention of the Act. You have to make application to SAHPRA. And also, the other thing is, because I think it might talk particularly to the test kits, because that's where we've had a lot of questions in this particular regard. So a test kit, what you actually have to do, you apply to us and you provide us with a technical dossier. And we then evaluate that technical dossier because there's performance information in there. And if we see that based on that information provided in the dossier that this looks like a test kit that meets, those specs that are in the MD07, then we say, okay, you are now authorized to import, and we limit it to a specific amount for the purpose of validation only. And we've actually had people who try to import over and over and again, way beyond the amount that is specified in that letter. So please note, you cannot import even one sample without authorization from SAHPRA. You cannot do that. You also cannot, if you are importing, have your test go through the performance validation by the laboratory unless SAHPRA has authorized you to do so. So that's really important to also note. And then also just another one on that is that only the National Reference Laboratory can do that performance evaluation.
Okay, there is a follow-up question to that. Does one therefore have to pay for a license before validation?
Yes, you do. So you have to do the license application and submit your technical dossier. But also, you see, the point in the technical dossier is that there's a portion there where actually the clinical assessment of the test kit as well as the performance outcomes of that test kit that would have been done by the manufacturer is captured in the technical dossier. So if you're someone who would like to import a test kit, then look at that technical dossier first. I mean, if that technical dossier shows you this product doesn't meet the spec, then don't apply for a license with that technical dossier, because it's very likely then that we won't be able to channel that product through for the performance evaluation.
Thank you, Andrea. We're going to move on to some questions around serology. So the first question from Judith: when wanting to submit technical data for serology or molecular testing, what are the minimum requirements, specifically regarding sample duplicates, that would be required?
Okay, so step one is that you have to have a technical dossier in place. And the technical dossier is going to give us a lot of information about the product, but in particular, what we are looking at is obviously what the performance outcome was for that particular test kit done by the manufacturer. So we've got a guideline. It's not a finalized guideline because we had published it for comments, but it was never finalized. But that will also give you a very good indication. It gives you a layout in terms of headings and so on. So if you don't have a technical dossier, then that guideline can guide you in terms of how to prepare the technical dossier for submission to SAHPRA.
Okay, and then Kevin had a question on MD 002 -007 of serological test kits. Are these defined by SAHPRA as antibody tests? And is this also used for rapid antigen tests, or is there another MD for these?
Okay, so we're actually hoping, and that's a great question, thanks Kevin. We are hoping to publish, so you would see also the way the series of communication has come out. The first one, the MD07, is the specific criteria for serology test kits for antibodies. And we will be publishing a TPP, which is your target product profile for antigens separately. So that will be coming out soon, probably within the next 2 weeks. We will see that document coming out. And then we'd also have a supplementary guidance for antigen test kits as well. So it's under development, but not yet finalized, but we will make that available. And I'll also alert the Westgrow team when it's up on our website and so on, so you could share with the participants or any of your stakeholders.
Okay, and this seems to be our last question related to this topic. In molecular testing space, many strategies to isolate viral RNA are being utilized. Many of these are very generally applicable. Do these still need to get a license if they are being used in a testing facility?
Yeah, so we've actually noticed that we've got test kits that are considered to be for research use only, and we've given authorization for those test kits to go, to be used for research use only, and then they find their way being used for diagnosis. So we've actually had to clamp down significantly on those. So even for test kits that are just being used in a testing facility, it needs to get authorization from SAHPRA. That's going to be critical, and the process and so on is exactly the same for any other molecular test kit.
Okay, and that wasn't the last question. We had one more. If something is CE IVD marked, what would you require for a molecular kit in order to register it with SAHPRA?
So remember that anything that's been CE marked for an IVD at the moment is a self-declaration. So we cannot rely on the decision of a self-declaration. So in terms of the requirements, and again, I've given you that list of communication, but you would also have to submit to us the technical dossier for that particular test kit, the product labeling, instructions for use, and then of course the license application, CV of authorized rep, the usual requirements, proof of payment. But I think in particular is the technical dossier, the packaging or labeling, and the instructions for use.
Fantastic. And we have one last question that's more related to the topic of COVID regulation. Does 70% alcohol-based foggers, including DDAC, need to be registered with SAHPRA?
Are you saying foggers?
Yes.
Yeah, so again, it depends on the place of use, which regulatory pathway it would go through. So again, on the SAHPRA website, if you, just to help you to navigate, you go on the SAHPRA website, tick health products, it's a tab at the top, click medical devices, you land on our medical device page, and then when you scroll down, there's a section on position papers. And if you then look at there's a position paper on disinfectants, sanitizers, and so on, and then this 70% alcohol-based fogger would fall into that group. Have a look at the position paper, because based on the intended use, the place of use, and then what the product is made of, it will actually inform the regulatory pathway for those. So generally a fogger would not be considered to be a medicine, but also again, depending on where it's used, it could either be considered a medical device under the jurisdiction of SAHPRA, or then under the Department of Health control. But that position paper would lead you accordingly.
Okay, coming back to the face masks, we have a question on, for KN95 or FFP2 masks for medical use, we are required to have a SAHPRA license. Are we also required to have a NRCS sales permit or approval?
Yes, you will. So again, on this slide deck, it will show you that, but then also there's that document that is on our website that explains fully. But yes, you would need that. And when you apply for the SAHPRA license, we actually cross-check to make sure that you have got those in place. So you actually submit it to us as evidence.
Okay, and the remaining questions are slightly more general. So we have an ISO certification from the manufacturer. Do we as distributors need an ISO certification as well?
Yes, you do. So any SAHPRA license manufacturer, wholesaler, distributor does need to have that in place. And also remember, That ISO 13485 is a quality management system for medical devices. So, for example, in your capacity as a South African-based distributor, you need to have a quality management system in place, which would then be able to add quality into the activities that you do as a distributor. It certainly is a requirement for your manufacturer to have it, but as a local distributor, you also need to have that.
Okay, and our next question is from Pierre. I want to know if SAHPRA regulates medical software.
Yes, we do consider it a medical device. So again, we've got a guidance document. I'm just trying to recall which one it is. I think the one is the classification guideline, which also just provides some rules for classification, and then medical software is included in that guideline, which is 8.05, available on our website. And then 16.03 talks to licensing of medical devices, and I think that also has a mention about software, because the software, you know, also, again, just depending on what the intended use of the software is and what the capabilities are, we do find that these things do fall in within the definition of a medical device, and we do regulate those then.
Okay. And then Vinesh would like to know, do all disposable hospital garments or gowns need to be sterilized?
So it just depends, right? I mean, when something is manufactured, the manufacturer will decide, okay, here's a garment, does this need to be sterile or not? And then in terms of clinical practice, also different hospitals or institutes might have different requirements. So when you are procuring these type of products, it will be up to the user to decide what they want to have. So it's not a requirement that, okay, I've got an overgarment or something that must be sterile. It's not necessarily. You know, I think if you're going into theatre, then those type of things are sterile. But when you're working in, say, casualty, perhaps they are not sterile. But it will depend on who is the user, what is the intended use of that product, and then it will determine is this now single use and needs to be disposed? Does it need to be sterile? So, you know, we don't pronounce on that, but it's important for you as somebody who's either manufacturing or importing to know what your user is going to use that product for.
Okay, great. And Anissa has asked an important question, and I think we definitely are in a situation where they, you know, with everybody all at once to solve these big problems around COVID. We might have a situation where we're not too sure exactly what's going on. So there is a perception that if your device has an FDA emergency approval, that the product is considered approved by SAHPRA. Can you please give your thoughts on this?
So remember, SAHPRA's regulatory model is definitely one of reliance. Okay, so what we always say is, especially for Class C and D, our higher risk products, we do require you to provide evidence that those particular devices are registered in the 6 jurisdictions that we recognize. And that is USA, so that's the US FDA, Europe, Japan, Brazil, Canada, and Australia. Now with COVID, things are obviously a little bit different, but certainly we have very much, and we've had a lot of applications coming through for a lot of different devices, and where we have had products that are listed by the US FDA with emergency use authorization, we have recognized that listing, we have also relied upon that, and we have also authorized use for all devices except for serology test kits, because the US FDA model for serology is a little bit different. What they actually do is they get the applications coming in, and if you look at the emergency use authorization, they allow them on the market, and then once they've concluded their evaluation, if they pass, then they remain on the market. If not, they remove them. So for that reason, we are not taking the US FDA serology listings. You know, we don't rely on those decisions. In fact, for all serology test kits, we're not applying a reliance model. We are doing a in-country performance evaluation before we allow listing.
Okay, fantastic. That's really useful, Andrea. Our next question, coming back to samples, comes from Vanessa. Can we bring in a sample test so that it can be analyzed, and how can we go about doing that?
No, you can't. So again, you have to, step one for imported test kits, step one is application to SAHPRA and submission of the technical dossier. Then SAHPRA would give you the authorization to bring in the samples that are required for validation. You cannot import even one medical device. It is a contravention of the Act. And what we're also doing, I mean, we've got now quite a nice list of individuals and companies who have brought in products illegally, and you know, if they are not able to comply with the regulations and the requirements of the Act, then we need to keep that in mind. Are they going to be suitable as SAHPRA license holders in the future if they're not able to comply with the requirements of the Act already? So it's really something of grave concern to us.
Okay, so Andrea, we've dealt with all the questions. A couple of the guys were asking questions that were more pertinent to the application. So you've already mentioned the dashboard and how you can be reached, and we will share the presentation as well so that everybody can know who to contact, and also importantly report the unlicensed companies and the unlicensed activities. I hope I haven't missed anybody else's comments, and I hope we've addressed everything thus far. And thank you very, very much, Andrea. This has been very insightful. I've learned a lot myself as well. So yes, and we hope to have another webinar with SAHPRA soon to address even more questions in the future. And I would really urge all the attendees and anybody that you know in your networks that have any further questions to submit those questions to webinars at Westgrow, as well as to either Mundi or to Andrea, and we can set up another session so that Andrea can further answer those questions and also address any further questions that you guys may have. Thank you very much.